Okay, thank you, Michael. Okay, up next will be George Reese, like I said, the CTO and founder of enStratus. And like RightScale, enStratus has a platform to help customers manage their applications in the cloud. They also have the option to run the cloud application management platform on-premise and have recently had some partnerships with the likes of Dell and other big IT companies. So, George, come on up, share your experience.
Thanks. So I'm going to talk a little bit first about timelines of enterprise adoption, and probably the most important thing to get out of what I'm saying here might be that the enterprise has always been using cloud, at least as long as I've been involved, which is since 2007. The funny thing is that for a while they just wouldn't admit it. And it sort of came in two phases. The first phase I'd call financial. The second phase I'd classify as agility, and we're in the agility phase now. And it breaks down into sort of starting in the 2006, 2007, but really 2008, 2009, where you had enterprises going in and deploying, what I'm referring to as IT annoyances. Of course, startups and everything, we're getting all of the attention in terms of being able to go from zero to, thousands of virtual machines in a short period of time with very little capital outlay. But what was going on in this 2008-2009 timeframe, of course, was the financial crisis, the loss of access to capital. And so things like dev test and marketing applications were getting the short shrift because they weren't able to capitalize themselves to be done. So to give a couple of interesting examples from this, one would be, our first customer was a company you'll probably recognize called Monsanto. That was working with another large company called Carlson Marketing to deploy a short-lived marketing application into the cloud. It was a loyalty program aimed at farmers, and it was only designed to last, I think, 12 months. Maybe it was 2 years. I forget the exact details. But the point is it was a finite lifetime application. So doing a capital outlay in 2008 for this was a non-starter, and IT didn't have the attention to give such a thing. So Carlson and Monsanto decided to work together and put this into Amazon Cloud. But there was a funny little catch to that. It had to live up to all of the enterprise security controls and constraints that all the other applications that they normally deploy behind their firewall had to live up to. So our function in this particular thing was to sit outside of Amazon, watch over the loyalty application, make sure it was living up to those controls, and while still benefiting from all the things they were doing in the cloud. So that's one example of finance being a driver in 2008, an IT annoyance being marketing. Another type of it sort of fits an IT annoyance, but is really the third-party small company developing for the enterprise. So the enterprise has decided to allow some third-party startup in a lot of cases, or just a very small vendor who doesn't compete by building out big infrastructure. And one example of that for us was a reinsurance company who was doing a lot of number crunching, and they needed to spin up, spin down servers to do all this number crunching. But again, enterprise being what it is, enterprise IT wanted to make sure it was again living up to controls. around security, audit controls, that sort of thing, even though, again, the data being crunched was anonymized and thus did not fit into your typical governance and compliance issues. So, this IT annoyances phase is things we don't want to worry about. It's not governed by any of the compliance issues that an enterprise might be faced with. Let's go ahead and let it go into the cloud and not think about it so that we can focus on our core stuff, as long as somebody is out there making sure that the things we care about are being dealt with. The second part, 2009-2010 timeframe, we start to evolve from the financial focus to the agility focus, and this is what I call the rogue IT phase. An interesting side note on all of this is that there are of course enterprises that today are just in the IT annoyances phase. When I talk about these phases, I talk about the leading adopters in the enterprise. In the 2009 to 2010 phase, the early adopter enterprises were finding that the people who had success with the IT annoyances were now going off and doing a whole bunch of things in the cloud because they learned during the earlier phases or from other people who had gone through the earlier phases that, hey, I can go around IT, same as with BYOD, go into the cloud and start doing stuff. And one of the things we would see in 2009, 2010 is I'd go to things like a cloud camp or some other conference, and I would tell, we'd get CIOs and stuff that insisted we're not going, as Simone actually talked about, we're not in the cloud, we'll never go in the cloud, and I could go in there and make a bet with them and say, yes, you are in the cloud, you just don't know it. And that was almost certainly the case in 2009, 2010. All enterprises were doing some level of experimentation, generally led by more autonomous business units like marketing and sales, putting stuff out there. And come last year, IT became aware of this. You stopped hearing CIOs insist that they weren't in the cloud, stopped insisting that they were never going to go into the cloud. And this phase really is focused on agility. It's where we've decided that we are going to build out a private cloud platform to rein in all these people who have been going out there with the objective of providing a cloud service behind the firewall that meets the agility objectives of the people who have gone rogue. Probably with the objective not necessarily, well, depending, I guess it varies from enterprise to enterprise. I mean, on the one hand, you have the enterprises that are more enlightened that are doing this because they think they can offer a value behind the firewall for certain kinds of applications and want to have an and strategy at this point, a private cloud plus a public cloud. Then there are those who are thriving under the delusion that they can bring all of these people behind the firewall and can ignore the public cloud. I'd say early part of 2011, it was more the delusion type, and as we evolved into 2012, most of the companies we're dealing with are more the enlightened side that are looking at this problem as an and problem. Private cloud for the right things, public cloud for the right things, and be smart about which is which. Autodesk is probably a good example of one of those enlightened organizations that are taking an and philosophy. They have a bunch of Amazon accounts. They have a private cloud, and what they're trying to do with us is actually get a single view across what they're doing in the actually multiple private clouds and in all of their Amazon accounts, and be able to govern them with the same view, and in either case, depending on the business need, offer the end customer, which is generally the internal business units, the sort of agility that cloud offers, but in the case of private cloud, offer certain levels of performance or governance that may not be available in the public cloud. The final phase, or not the final phase, but the phase we're in right now, and I don't know how long it goes, is, but we've just started seeing some enterprises who are taking the approach of going, we're going to take a public cloud first approach, and then everything sort of has to prove it goes into the private cloud. So the idea being that, again, leveraging a management tool like us to provide the correct decision-making framework on what constitutes the right thing with a bias towards public cloud, but essentially recognizing that the public cloud is a critical part of the internal enterprise infrastructure. And before I go on the next slide here, the one thing I'd like to add is that the phase beyond this is, I guess, reconciliation day between the cloud world and the ITIL world. For the most part, the cloud world has tried to avoid fighting the battle with the ITIL world, because a lot of what ITIL represents is destructive to the cloud value proposition. However, ITIL is serving a very critical purpose in most enterprises, and as cloud becomes more foundational to the way enterprise is going to do business, there's going to have to be some give and take on both sides in terms of identifying what the proper role of ITIL in a cloudy infrastructure is. So, looking at the cloud computing landscape, when we talk about public clouds, one of the interesting things is that in our experience, only Amazon has proven itself at scale, and that may not be a fair way of wording it. The right way would be that Amazon has achieved such an immense scale at this point that is beyond what anybody else can imagine at this point. And that is why they have continued to be this, 8 million pound gorilla out there, and everybody else keeps having a hard time catching up. And an interesting thing is that enStratus ended up being this multi-cloud management layer because I wrote an abstraction layer back in 2008 to separate enStratus from Amazon, because I was certain in 2008 that there was no way in 2010 that we'd be using a bookseller as our infrastructure provider. The reality is the value is it's made it really easy for us to adopt to new clouds. The interesting thing is that Amazon continues to lead the market in terms of innovating and scale. Now, the interesting thing is there have been some interesting challengers coming to market lately. Google is the one that has proven that it can operate at scale as a business. The question is, can they operate at scale as an infrastructure cloud provider? We don't know the answer to that yet. HP's got a very interesting cloud, Rackspace as well on OpenStack. Question again is, can they operate it at the same scale as Amazon? And then Microsoft also, from a very different approach, is doing some interesting things with their Azure platform and infrastructure clouds. Some innovators to watch out for, DataPipe and Joyent. They're taking some different approaches to cloud that may drive features in other clouds, and then I don't have an answer on the scale thing for them either. And then, of course, from a legacy perspective, there are a whole bunch of applications out there that really don't care about scaling infrastructure. What they care about is stable, predictable infrastructure. And I don't mean that to suggest that everybody else up there isn't stable or predictable, but ones that, what I mean by stable and predictable, are ones that follow the traditional IT structure and domain model, and those would be Bluelock, IBM OpSource, and they're going to have a role in any sort of big enterprise picture, because we believe the big enterprise picture is as I put up here, a mix of private and public cloud. There won't be the only public enterprise. There's not going to be an only private enterprise. And in fact, we think that what a mature enterprise cloud looks like is it actually is probably at least 2 private clouds and probably at least 2 public clouds. And they're brought together in a hybrid mix, and then you add platform as a service on top of that. So that's our view.
Great. Thank you so much, George.
Thanks.